Hi there teachers, future teachers, anyone who interested in teaching using this method. Hope all well guys. So in this lesson tutorial we're going to talk about TPRS and how to apply this method in your class. My story with TPRS begins in the last few weeks when I did a course of lessons using this method, and my student and I had so much fun really teaching for me and learning for her using this method. So it's a win-win strategy, and this is one of the hallmark of TPRS. It makes learning a language enjoyable, and I believe learning a language and learning in general must be enjoyable. So in this lesson tutorial we're gonna have 4 objectives. What is TPRS? The 3 steps of teaching with TPRS, how to adapt a textbook for TPRS, and finally, why should you use TPRS in a language classroom? So, what is TPRS? TPRS stands for Teaching Proficiency Through Reading and Storytelling. This method was created by Blaine Ray in the late 1980s. It's a language teaching method based on the idea that the brain needs enormous amounts of comprehensible input to acquire a new language. It focuses on using interactive books and oral stories that contain the most commonly used words and phrases in the language that you're teaching to help students get familiar with a new language easily and quickly. When developing TPRS, Ray was influenced by the work of Dr. Stephen Krashen and Dr. James Asher. Ray combined Dr. Asher's teaching method TPR and Dr. Krashen's comprehensible input-based language acquisition strategies. The result is a teaching method that focuses on the importance of teacher-student interaction and the use of comprehensible input in keeping the learner's interest to become fluent in a new language. With TPRS, the teacher promotes language proficiency among students through contextualized, repetitive, and compelling comprehensible input, which can be in the form of children's novels and interactive materials. Now, our second lesson objective is the 3 steps of teaching with TPRS. We can break down the TPRS teaching method into 3 major steps for greater ease. Step 1, establish meaning. 2, storytelling. And finally, reading. Now, let's flesh out the details and get into the specific techniques used in each step. Step 1, establish meaning. Pick target words and establish their meanings. What words or expressions do you want your student to know during the next lesson? Pick just 1 to 3 target words. I imagine that you're saying right now, oh really? I can't do that. I have a textbook to follow. Yeah, I know. We'll come to that in the next lesson objective, how to adapt your textbook for TPRS. Just be patient. We limit the number of target words taught in any given lesson so we can sufficiently emphasize them and ensure that they're committed to students' long-term memories. When you're done choosing the target words, establish their meanings for your students. Now, how to establish meaning? Very important question. Now we're gonna talk about the best way for establish meaning. One way to establish meaning is by showing pictures. So for example, if your target word is jump, in this case you can show your class a picture of people jumping like this. Another technique is by demonstrating jump itself. Show what the word means by jumping several times, and you can ask volunteers to do it. Another technique is by gesturing. Let's say your target word is eat. Choose a gesture which illustrates the word. For example, you can use your left hand as an imaginary plate and move your right hand as if you bring food to your mouth. Do this action every time you say eat. Then let the students act it out. The movement itself will serve as another memory aid. You can teach them hundreds of words using gestures and body language. Just say the word with suitable gesture or demonstrate it with your body language. Then repeat it every time you say the word. Then let the students act it out. Now, how can I teach them abstract words? Maybe you wonder, like idea, creativity, information, curious, etc. Simply translate them and write the translation on the board. This will provide the initial stimulus for learning, and the class can glance at the board anytime they forget during the lesson. Build personal connection between the students and the target words that will commit it to students' long-term memories. Now maybe you wonder, how can I build a personal connection? One way is to ask your students questions using these words. For example, you can ask your students, do they know a lot of information about the sport? Do they like curious people? And so on. Of course, your questions will be in your students' first language except your target words. In TPRS, we establish meaning early. We don't keep students guessing what the words mean. One of the foundational concepts of TPRS is comprehensible input. Every word that comes out of the mouth of the teacher must be perfectly understood by the students. How does the teacher know that the meanings of the words have been established and the class has understood? TPRS has comprehension checks to make sure that the teacher and his class are on the same page. Questions serve as comprehension checks. For example, when teaching the word sketchbook, the teacher asks questions like, what does a sketchbook mean? Can we eat the sketchbook? Can we drink the sketchbook? Can we draw on the sketchbook? And so on. Once you have strong indicators of comprehension, move on to the next step. And the next step is storytelling. Tell a story using the target words. You've established the words' meaning in step 1. You then build a story around them. One of the techniques that used in TPRS is called personalizing. You involve the class by asking them questions that will help move the story forward. For example, if you've got a story about a little duck who goes to the city for the first time, you might want to ask, why do you think the little duck goes first? The class will give a variety of answers. Pick a good one and run with it. Let's say someone shouts, the store. So you go, the little duck the little blue duck steps inside the store and saw many wonderful things. What kind of store is it? A chocolate store, shout some of your students. You continue engaging them by asking, what did he buy? Move the story forward with the details your students give. By personalizing your stories will engage and amaze the students, especially the kid whose answer you picked. Unlike other stories where the actions and the details have been predetermined, your story is actually still alive, open for the curious leading of your students. As you tell the story, do lots of comprehension checks and only move on when everyone understands. Keep your checks to simple questions that students can answer with a word or two, eliciting actions or motions that go along with the target vocabulary. You may choose to tell the story bilingually, especially if you have true beginners, or in the target language only. After all, it depends on your student's level. Alright, what about the grammar? A grammar is learned through storytelling, a more natural way rather than explicitly. A grammar is taught contextually. There are no grammar lessons with TPRS. Well, not traditional ones. With TPRS, you teach a grammar as it comes up in the story. When the students need to know a grammar structure, you take 5 seconds to explain it in context and then move on. This is known as pop-up grammar instructions. It's practical, quick, and memorable. Another very important technique in this step is circling. It's simply asking repetitive questions about the same detail of a story. Circling serves to build students' ability to process and respond to questions, check students' comprehension, provide additional uses of the new language structures, and keep students engaged. Here is a typical example of circling. The teacher says a statement. John wanted to be president. Students react, or, in TPRS stories, whatever the teacher is saying, it's fascinating. So when the teacher reveals a new detail from the story, the students react to it with or ah, or if it's something sad, oh no. Then yes, no questions about the statement. Did John want to be president? Yes or no? After that, either or question. Did John want to be president, or did he want to play baseball? Yes, no question with a negative answer. Did John want to play baseball? Restate the negative and restate the positive. Right, John did not want to play baseball. He wanted to be president. WH question about the original statement. What country did John want to be president of? Original statement with a new detail. Yes, John wanted to be president of Russia. During the entire story, the technique of circling is used extensively. This means that after each new detail revealed about the story, the teacher asks the students questions to recall what they know. Ask in a variety of ways and often more than once. If only a few students are responding, then it needs to be circled more. until all can answer correctly and quickly. Step 3, reading. Give a reading that uses the target words. This reading is based on the material in the 2 previous steps. It reinforces the content in a different format. You read and discuss the story in step 2, or a different story which contains the same target words and grammar structures from step 2, but with different details. This reading is often done by having one or all the students translate the reading out loud in order to ensure that the students have complete comprehension of the reading material. The grammar points in the reading may be briefly discussed with very short explanations, often 5 seconds. The discussion of the reading is carried out in the target language, with you asking questions both about the reading itself and also use personalizing, the technique that we talked about in the previous step. Maybe the best way really to personalize the story is by doing a drama show to demonstrate what the story about. Pick 1 to 2 from your students and make the story about them and let them act it out. Now, the third lesson objective is how to adapt a textbook for TPRS. Step 1, establish meaning. Take the vocabs in your lesson and establish their meanings. And this can be done by pictures, gestures, realia, and translation with abstract words. In step 2, storytelling, put the target words from step 1 into a story. You can create your own story or use similar or the same story from your textbook. Use the techniques that we talked about: personalizing, circling, comprehension check, explain a grammar, and pop-up style. Step 3, reading. Read and discuss the story in your textbook, which contain the same target words and grammar structures from step 2. Have one of your students or all of them translate the reading out loud. A grammar points in the reading may be briefly discussed with very short explanations, often 5 seconds. Use personalizing. Now, the fourth lesson objective is why should you use TPRS in a language classroom? And the answer is really simple. It changes the atmosphere of the class and the attitude of your students. Imagine being a student in a class which utilizes TPRS. Instead of being graded on correctly answering grammar exercises, you're listening to a tale of a little girl because she's 10 years old, just like you, and it's her first time in the forest alone. The teacher asks the class if Red, her name, chose to eat the apples she found on the ground, and the class answering the questions, interacting with the story. It's not a predetermined story, the class has a say in it. When the teacher is telling a story, this doesn't feel like a language class at all. Even though you're in a class, it feels like you're having lunch with your friends and telling each other stories. If you made it so far, indeed, thank you. Thank you for listening, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. I left all the resources in the description box. You'll find links to great articles and videos to teachers who uses TPRS in their class. Take care. Bye for now.